Yep.
Yes, please, Kat.
Just give about 10 seconds to...
Yes.
All the stretches.
Yeah. Good timing, Peter.
Okay.
Oh, mine. Yep, first one up.
Well, welcome everybody to the General Committee meeting. I declare the meeting open. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Cubby Cubby or the Gubby Gubby people, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We have one apology from Councillor Noosaville. Do we have any presentations?
No, not today.
No presentations or deputations. And the first item referred from the Planning and Environment Committee is the Noosa Biosecurity Plan. There's a further report in the General Committee agenda on page 3. Welcome Peter Milne, welcome Kim. Councillors, do you have any questions for staff? Ingrid?
Yes, I have a question, Peter. At the Monday Planning and Environment Committee meeting, I asked whether the biodiversity plan...
I think it was a Tuesday.
Sorry, Tuesday's Planning and Environment Committee meeting. I asked whether the biodiversity plan is planning for the impact of climate change and bushfires on native vegetation, and whether any steps will be planned to protect against invasive species taking over after fires. Can you explain to what extent you've addressed this, or how you've addressed this in the revised version that you've put before us today?
Sure. So on page 14 of the revised biosecurity plan, there's a table in there about some of the climate change pressures, and one of the rows there includes some information on fire management. Essentially what it is, if there's a added risk from climate change to vegetation and habitat, and encouraging more weed species, for example, we'd actually build that into the prioritisation table to say that this is a higher priority for management, basically. So it elevates the position of the different species in terms of priority management.
Thank you.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Moved, Councillor Wellington.
Just clarify you're moving the one in the further report.
Yep.
Yeah. Seconded, Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Wellington, you wish to speak
No,
to
thanks.
the motion? Any councillors wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I will. Firstly, I'd like to thank staff for the prompt response, because the weekend before the planning environment, I raised a few concerns about both not being really transparent in how it's linked to the environment strategy and the monitoring of the outcomes. And I think that the changes that we made is exactly what I was thinking would actually make the plan a lot more robust in identifying why we do these things. It's not just to kill a weed, it's to protect our ecosystems and protect the productive lands. I also raised the same issue as Councillor Jackson in terms of it. The previous one just had one paragraph about climate change, and I didn't think that was adequate. I do think now that we've put this table in, it makes it really clear that what we're facing right now is change management regimes. It's going to affect weed management, pest management, and having that table there just reinforces to council and its employees that we must always be thinking about how things might change going forward. I cleaned out my shed when I was getting my grab pack the other day, and I came across my second year climate textbook. It was published in 1977. It was the first time I'd read what the greenhouse effect was, and the chapter on the future clearly identified what we're currently going through. So in 1977, climate scientists were identifying what the potential futures were. We're now living that, and it's going to affect all our operations, and I think it's really important that in all our plans we make really overt reference to it and keep it at the top of our mind what might be the changing circumstances and how is that going to affect both what we do and how we do it. So I think that overall the approach to biosecurity in the plan is good, and I think it's even better now that we've got some linkage to the higher level strategy and some forward thinking in terms of what might be priorities going forward.
Thank you. You have Councillor Parker?
Yeah. Firstly, I'd just like to thank staff for all their work, and as well Councillor Stockwell, because of his keen interest in these matters. He's worked with staff to get some changes, which is positive, of course. Understand, I don't know council, but there's 23 million feral pigs in Australia, and that's just one particular pest. But they're looking at eradication or at least reducing massive numbers. And we know we've got the foxes and wild dogs and all the problems we've got with regards to native animals and feral cats, of course. Big issues here. But I'd like to support our staff, who's Cameron in particular, is out there doing a lot of eradication, feral deer, etc. in our shire. But it needs to be a holistic approach because little areas are cleared out. There's other shires around us. There's a biosphere north of us. There's a biosphere proposed south of us. But we need to look at the big picture and marry in with some of these shires with some of this stuff. I mean, we can fight in our patch of dirt forever, but that's just not going to cut it. So for me, it's a holistic approach. Some of the stuff in here, I know talking about technology. It's technology that's possibly caused a lot of, well, not possibly, it's caused a lot of our headaches, but it's also technology gives us opportunity to help clean up a lot of headaches. And I notice the targeting of drones these days, are using drones. The farmers are using them across the nation now. Not all farmers, but some are up to speed, targeting weed species, etc. It's very effective and it's very targeted. So I note in the report that type of activity also assists. So we've got to get in the game too. We've got to get smarter, work smarter, not harder. But I guess beating weeds, you know, I think as long as I'll be on the planet, we'll be trying to beat the weed problem. As fast as you eradicate, they pop up elsewhere. Needs tremendous resources, and we don't have them. So we need to look at state and federal governments to give us a hand with funding when we're targeting various species. We have the fire ant problem. They're trying to hold them off. In Brisbane, they seem to be continually moving. Very hard to get out of the country. So when we're talking biosecurity, it's not just us, weeds, etc. Swine fever, African swine fever. If it gets into this nation, we're decimated. Our whole pork industry is gone. It's already decimating Asia and other countries. But out of those decimations for them, if we can do the right thing, it's opportunity for us. And there's many opportunities. But yeah, it's about working smarter. It's about collaboration with all governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Any other councillors wish to speak? Wish to close? Councillor Wellington?
No, thanks.
Okay, put the motion. Those in favour? Against, the motion's carried. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank
Good work.
you.
Thanks, Pete. Good work.
The next item is the Planning and Environment Court appeal. Refusal of application for operational works, prescribed tidal works extension to Jetty at 180 Gympie Terrace, Noosaville. Referred here for further consideration. And that's on page 29 of the Environment and Planning Committee agenda. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Frank.
Councillors, have any questions for Patrick?
I have a question that's probably better to the director rather than Patrick. It's just a point of clarification about the nature of this application and our role as councillors and how that might affect the way we go forward. And it's in relation to comments that Councillor Jackson made, which were reported in the press on Friday, where it was referred to that Councillor Jackson wouldn't support this particular recommendation because she believes the extra $150,000 involved in moving the jetty back will still have many boats refuelling outside the area. It appears at least that Councillor Jackson was in part relating to the financial implications of enforcing compliance with development conditions. And from reading the report we've got in front of us, the original application was for prescribed tidal works, which is code accessible. And the relevant codes are the Noosaville Locality Code, the Watercourse Works Code, and after reviewing both these codes, I can see no overall specific or specific.
This is a question.
It certainly is, yeah, it's a long one. But it has to get context because it's important planning regulatory. Our role as a council is guided by the Planning Act, and it's important when councillors vote they know what they can and can't consider. After reviewing both these codes, I see no overall or specific outcomes that in any way refer to the financial affairs of the business proposing the development. So the question is, considering that the Planning Act clearly specifies the code assessment is a bounded assessment and must be assessed only against assessment benchmarks and must have regard to matters prescribed by the regulation, is it therefore correct to suggest the Council is prevented at law from considering such factors in the deliberation on this matter, financial matters?
Nice start to your week.
Tricky question.
That is correct. This the application for this development was code accessible, and it's a bounded application. The Planning Act clearly specifies that council cannot consider personal circumstances or financial matters in assessing those applications. This report, however, is about the appeal. So that's relevant for the original decision. That's correct.
So I'm happy to move the motion.
Okay, move Councillor Stockwell, seconded Councillor Pardon.
And I do so because I think there's two main issues that we have to think about, and why I came here was this difference of opinion about supporting a council decision. One is that procedure relating to our regulatory role within the development assessment process, and the other, I believe, is the importance from a principle perspective of why we should defend the decision. Under the Local Government Act, Section 11, we are a body corporate, and that's played out in terms of the Council Code of Conduct, where it states that we can express a dissenting opinion with majority decision of council, but respect the democratic process by acknowledging that the council decision represents a majority view of council, and I don't argue against that. However, it's also important that the Code of Conduct said we must respect and comply with all policies, procedures and resolutions of council. As we just heard, the original decision was about a code accessible and should only be assessed against the benchmark. And so while it might be unclear that whether we can introduce new issues when we're deciding to defend appeal, to me that's an important consideration, is we should be deciding to defend this appeal based on the substance of the application. And then I move on to the principles. In the report it talks about one of the grounds for refusal of the development that we are assessing is that it will not protect the Noosa River and foreshores from cumulative impacts of development. I think that is the core principle. It's one that defending of this appeal is about standing up to the long-held aspirations of our community as first expressed before the planning scheme, actually, in the Noosa River Plan. And in the Noosa River Plan, it's about ensuring the Noosa River system and tidal lands are conserved and promoted as a community asset. And it actually had that in item H of the purpose of that plan was to consider the cumulative impacts of development on and adjacent to the river system in assessing individual applications. And one of the desired outcomes that we should be standing up for in this appeal in that plan is that we consider the cumulative and incremental effects of structures and activities on and adjacent to the river system. I think the current community hasn't varied much from the early 2000s, because when we put the Noosaville Foreshore Master Plan, the stopping the sprawl was perhaps, it was quoted by the consultant as perhaps the most talked about theme of the program, and the majority agreed there should be no commercial benefit from use of public spaces.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm finished anyway, so.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay, but
So,
my point of order was that council is talking to the original decision which has already been made and which can't be rescinded, where actually the only thing before us is a determination of whether or not to defend council's decision. To go back and re-prosecute any aspect of the original decision is not appropriate for what we're being asked for here.
I accept your point that would be inappropriate, but that's not my intention in what I'm doing. What I'm doing is arguing to council why I think it should be a unanimous decision to support that decision, because it's a decision which is based on long-standing principles, and to me, making a principled decision is very important on this, because it sets a precedent that this council wants to stand up for those long-held principles, and that's why I support defending the appeal.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I did hear a little bit of Kim falling is what you talked about when you responded to Councillor Stockwell's question. And can you just clarify, did your answer relate to today's motion, or did your answer relate to the September motion that council approved?
I keep going to stand up.
No,
Excuse
that's
me.
stand up.
I commented on two things. both the previous report and today's. So their response to that question, that councillors can't consider financial or personal circumstances in a bounded application, relates to the original decision.
Yeah.
Today's decision is about whether or not council wishes to defend the appeal that's been made against that original decision.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Parton.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, there's a lot of talk about principles here. And as people know, I don't get into details of law and read all the fine print, local government acts, and God knows what. But some learned people go right into that detail, and good for them. The principle I take on board here is a councillor's decision is a councillor's decision. A councillor is elected by the people. It's a democratic process. So on the principle of a councillor wanting to put forward their particular opinion, and after the debate's over, that we've had these debates on these various issues, but a councillor who continues to hold that position, I don't have a problem with that, because they're a politician elected by the people and they have their individual rights. Now, if it's something untoward, we have CEOs, we have people who can advise us of that, but on the principle of a councillor's taking a position or a stand as an individual councillor, that's the principle that I uphold anyway, so I respect those rights.
Okay. So in relation to the motion before us, Frank,
Yeah.
what would you like to say?
Well,
Is that it?
I'm talking about,
Yeah.
this was discussed
Yeah.
by a councillor already here, so I'm entitled to respond and talk through that particular issue, I believe. Do you believe, Mr. Chairman, is that correct? This was brought up, principles,
Yes. Yeah.
law, and all that. I'm just putting the position.
Sure. I'm hoping we just don't stray too far from the motion before us.
Yeah, well, I thought the previous speaker might have, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Anyway, Frank, you've got the floor.
Yeah. Look, I support the defence of this motion. Absolutely. I could take leave. I will take leave to speak a bit more, seeing my learned.
You've got plenty of time.
My learned friend has already taken leave, I believe. Look, we spoke about it was raised in the Noosa River Plan. It was raised about the encroachment. It was also opportunity that the person here, and I think the public have a right to know, you could say, oh, common sense, and leave it as it is. Leave that jetty, leave that roll. But it's not about common sense. There was, council did give, let this jetty get longer, did give. There was a letter, I remember in history here, there was a letter that allowed actually more than what was originally proposed.
And again, Mr. Chair, point of order, can you please give some clarity here? We seem to be once again re-prosecuting a decision that is already a resolution of council. Because that resolution has been enacted, it can't be rescinded. We should not be re-prosecuting the argument about the decision. All we should be discussing is whether or not to defend council's resolution, please.
And look, under the you're extremely correct. Under the Local Government Act, it's the chairman's role to ensure that the discussion and debate is focused on the motion directly before us. There was some latitude given it. It's a general committee, it's not an ordinary committee, but it would, Councillor Parton, could you please focus on the motion that's before us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the Mayor's quite correct in what he said there. Look, I understand that. And I was taking a bit of poetic license because someone else took a bit of poetic license. But look, the main thing is, for me, is to support this motion, support the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parton. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion?
I will.
Councillor Jess.
I won't talk about, the decision. I respected what we've done prior, but I will talk about just how I don't support us going to court with this again, like I didn't vote for it in the beginning. It is a common sense approach, and I just think it's silly. It's built, it's already there, it's the sake of 1.5 metres, and it's a usable jetty, and I'm not supporting us going to court on that. Simple.
Thank you, Councillor Glasgow. Councillor Wellington.
What we're being asked to decide upon here is not the original decision, and Councillor Glasgow again has been at fault by going to the original decision. The matter before us has already been decided. It's a majority decision that's been reached. We're not debating the merits of that original decision, because that would mean re-prosecuting the matter, and we can't do that. As I've said, it's already a resolution of council that can't be rescinded. It's been enacted. What we're being asked about here is whether we defend the democratic decision of council against an appeal to overturn a democratic decision of council. In the past, we've consistently honoured the democratic decision of council by defending majority positions of the council. I'm going to make an analogy here. My role as mayor, there are cases when my personal vote is not in accord with the majority view, but once a majority view is made and it becomes a resolution of council, as mayor, I defend that position. I support that position. I do not present my own personal position. My role is to represent council, and by representing council, I support any decision that is a majority decision that becomes a resolution of this council. Ultimately, the majority view is the only view that's important. What individual councillors decide is less important than the majority view of council, because the majority view becomes the decision of council. And it's a democratic process, obviously, to reach that position. The individual views don't represent the view of council, they represent the view of the individual councillors. Only a majority view represents the position of council, and I respect the democratic position and decisions the council makes. And look, I'm aware of many instances where councillors who are in a minority view on a decision nevertheless have understood the need to be consistent in supporting councillors, in supporting the resolutions of council through appeal processes. They may not have voted with the majority, they nevertheless see the merit in defending council's majority view. And that's because council has a fantastic track record of defending its decisions, and that has been noted in the Planning and Environment Court, that this council has been consistent in defending its positions and thus defending its planning scheme. And so this example is no different. Either you respect the democratic process and the decision of council, or you put your own personal view above the view of council, and I will not do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, I'll speak to the motion, thank you. I'm speaking to the motion that is before us today, which is a recommendation to defend an appeal against council's refusal of an application about, and I quote from the staff report, an existing jetty on Gympie Terrace. This is not the same motion as the motion council considered in September, and I believe Kim Rawlings has confirmed that. The motion considered in September was about whether or not to refuse the application to make a minor change to a jetty, which had incorrectly extended beyond extra 2.6 meters more than the original council development approval. Council already debated that in September and decided to refuse, which I happened to vote against. So at that point, for the first motion, there was a majority view given. For the motion that's before us right now, we yet are to have a majority view. Council does not yet have a position on the motion that's before us today. I acknowledge that Council's September decision to refuse the extension was the majority view of Council about that matter. But today, I'm going to exercise my democratic right as an independent councillor to vote against defending the appeal, which is a new motion. I make decisions about how I vote on a case-by-case basis. The reason for not voting in favor of defending is that I think defending the appeal is not a good use of ratepayers' funds, as even if the jetty length is reduced by the 2.6 meters, the larger boats that refuel at that jetty will still be in the waters outside of the lease boundary. And so there is really no difference to the cumulative impact on the Noosa River. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Look, I'm going to speak in favour of the motion before us. Speaking generally, around 96% of all development applications to Noosa Council are approved. A small minority make applications contrary to the planning scheme and take the Noosa Council to court when their applications are refused, and this is one of those occasions. In this case, the application relates to works that are carried out contrary to the original development approval, and this has been well established. I support the reasons why we are defending the appeal. Principally, it's about upholding the Noosa planning scheme and the conditions to which development applications are held under the Noosa planning scheme. The conditions are intended to preserve the amenity of the Noosa River that we all enjoy. And Council has refused the application to retrospectively approve the non-compliant work and been taken to court. As been said before, Noosa Council has an impressive record of successfully defending its decisions, and key to its success, according to at least one planning and environment court judge, has been the consistency with which Noosa Council has made and defended decisions that are consistent with the planning scheme. Based on this, to not defend council decisions in court is to weaken future defences of council's decisions and to broadcast a message that would, over time, encourage overscale, non-compliant, speculative applications. If not defending the Noosa planning scheme in court was the usual response over the past several decades, Noosa would arguably look like many other southeast Queensland coastal cities and towns, and I don't think we should introduce that practice now. Defending the planning scheme, whether it be through council decisions or in defending court appeals, has made Noosa the place it is today, and we have an enviable success rate in that regard, and I fully support the decision to defend this appeal. Councillor Stockwell, wish to close?
Yeah, I will close. I do think it's important to understand when we make decisions in development assessment that we might be elected representatives, but we are acting as a regulator. And that's really important to ensure the process is right. I fully understand some of the comments made. I do think it's important to clarify that Councillor Jackson mentioned existing jetty. It wasn't existing at the time the development approval was given. It was constructed contrary to the plans that were approved and submitted by the applicant, and that herein lies the problem.
Point of order. I've been accused of speaking of an existing jetty that didn't exist. I quoted directly from the staff report using the words existing jetty, so I don't think I can be accused of that.
I'll have a point of order too. You can't have a point of order that contradicts something that someone says. It says it in our standing orders. You cannot use a point of order simply because you don't like what someone said.
And that's true. Councillor Stockwell has the floor. He's making his points. Thank you. Sometimes we just have to listen to what's being said, Councillor Jackson.
And I acknowledge that Councillor Jackson did quote. I'm clarifying the context of the statement existing jetty, and that it's important to understand it wasn't existing at the time the development approval was given. I do totally concur with what the Mayor said in terms of democratic process and the need to defend the appeal. I do think, however, for me, going to appeal is driven by an understanding that you can make problems occur in the future when you make a whole lot of small decisions that cumulatively impact on the overall outcome. And in this case, while some may see it as a minor transgression, it is about the cumulative impact and the precedent, and therefore I think on a principled perspective it's very important to defend the appeal.
Thank you. Put the motion. Those in favour? Councillors Wellington, Stockwell, Pardon and Wilkie. Those against? Councillors Jackson and Glasgow. And the motion's carried. Thank you, Patrick. Now, item 3 is the draft Noosa District Sports Complex and Cooroy Sports Complex Master Plans, being referred here for further consideration,
Thank you.
and Councillor Pardon has a motion that is circulated for our consideration. Hello, Kerry.
Hello.
Councillors, before we move to motions, do you have any questions for Kelly?
I probably would rather have a question for Councillor Pardon, but Councillor Pardon, will you be explaining the reasons for your motion during your speech, or can
Yeah.
I ask you now?
Yeah, no, I'll let you know during my speech.
Oh,
Right. Well, do you want to move it?
Yeah,
Councillor
yeah,
Pardon?
yeah.
Move Councillor Pardon,
I'll second it.
seconded Councillor Stockwell.
Yeah, happy to explain, councillors.
Can I
Yeah,
suggest you
look.
can I suggest you read it out?
Oh, sorry.
The changes.
Right, so the changes are, the council note the report by the Community Development Officer, Sport and Recreation to the Services and Organisation Committee meeting dated 12th of November 2019 and approve the draft Noosa District Sports Complex Master Plan included as attachment 2 to the report for the purposes of community consultation. B, approve the draft Cooroy Sports Complex Master Plan included as attachment 1 to the report for the purpose of community consultation, subject to the following amendments. On page 29, delete the section titled Tenure at the bottom of the page. 2, pages 39 to 40, delete section 9 titled Revised Tenure Plan, including the map on page 40. C,
Yeah, that should be C.
request the Chief Executive Officer to collate and consider the feedback for the purposes of developing final master plans for the future consideration of Council. Got a seconder and Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the reason I've moved this motion, councillors, if you look on page 29 of the draft Cooroy Master Plan, Sports Complex Master Plan, it refers to, if you look down near the bottom there, under tenure, number 1, freeholding the lands, lease and the Crown reserves, transferring these to council ownership, or council transferring the freehold sites to the Crown as reserves and assuming control of these as trustee. So I was on speaking to staff about this matter. What I'm trying to do, I guess, is remove that out of the master plan, and we can have a future debate about which way we will go. I didn't particularly want the draft to go out with those particular headings in there. For me, and not having all the knowledge around this, the lands, etc., I would prefer council to actually purchase land and have ownership, and therefore council can manage, and also if it needs to build more infrastructure or other infrastructure, it becomes the owner. It's just in the past, when I've looked at what we've done as council over time, to gift the state lands or to sell the state lands, whatever way it may occur, then council ends up in a bind. It has no opportunity anymore to run its own race with regards to those lands. Once the state owns them, they own them forever, and the state will do what the state will do. So just in this particular draft plan, I just didn't want it going out with that particular those particular ideas in there. I think that's staff saying, well, either or. I'm saying, well, I think we need discussion with regards to ownership of those lands in the future. So I just thought, we'll take it out of the draft, see what comes back in the plan, what responses we get to this draft master plan from the public and the users groups, etc., and then have a discussion down the track. It's nothing hard and fast here. It's just an opinion from this councillor. I think we need to have a wider look rather than going out with that idea that we would actually hand our land over or sell our land to the state. I guess I'm a buyer, not a seller.
Councillor.
A question for Kerry Contoni, please. Removing the entire section of tenure is one way to approach this. Another might be to remove the second paragraph after the 2 dot points. And the reason I ask that, and the question is, are those 2 dot points, 1 and 2, the only possible outcomes, or are there further possible outcomes in terms of land tenure that aren't encapsulated in points 1 and 2?
So through the chair, thank you, Councillor Wellington. The options at 1 and 2 are those that have been considered by all of the stakeholders that have a role in tenure as being the preferred of the options. Obviously there is the option to leave the tenure as it is. Yeah. However, there are considerable tenure options, issues on site. For example, one of the boundaries is running through a building, which therefore gives those organisations that have least real difficulty when they need to apply for a grant, for example, to have works done on their building. So it's the desire of all tenure parties to resolve this tenure issue, and those are the preferred options. So nobody would like the tenure option left as is.
Further question then. If this section was to be removed elsewhere in this draft master plan, does it refer to the tenure issue?
Yes, so you'll see just above the current heading tenure on page 29 is the paragraph, the tenure of the complex requires reviewing and updating to streamline and reduce the administrative burden of tenure transfer to user groups and management of land use agreements by user groups and council. So I think that if we remove that section at the base of the page, it still allows us through the consultation period to take on board further consultation regarding the tenure matter, because noting, of course, this is just a draft and we're going through that next broader consultation period.
You have a further question,
Yeah. In terms of that paragraph you pointed to, and I did note that, it doesn't really explain why there are tenure issues in terms of the state's role versus council's role. So might it need some further explanation in there?
Thank you. There is a little bit of explanation through the document. However, it was the section tenure that neatly brought it together. We could look at a further modification, for example, to remove the recommendations, but highlight the complexity and the issues surrounding that.
Sorry, Brian, you go.
Is this master plan being used as a formal master plan under the Land Act, or is it just referring? Is it just towards that?
I'd have to get clarity on that, Councillor.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of, other than the obvious that you just mentioned about the leaseholder who has got split tenure.
Yes.
It's not an issue that consultation is going to be greatly informed by. So from my perspective, it's not going to be something that's make or break. However, if it's going to be used under the Land Act, it probably is an issue that needs to be overtly consulted on to get the master plan status. Anyway, so that's just mine.
Yeah.
I think I have a question of Councillor Pardon, Councillor. You asked, I believe I heard you say you were favouring the concept of council owning land. Just to understand, when I read this paragraph on page 29, it doesn't appear to say which option is preferred. It seems to have option number 1, that the land, the freeholding, the land lease and crown reserves be freeholded and transferred to council ownership, which I guess would mean all council would own it. And number 2, council, option 2 is council transferring the freehold sites to crown. So it's a swap one way or a swap the other way. So I'm just wondering why, if those both options are there and there's no recommendation of which one is the best solution, why you are concerned that they be there.
Well, I just think that, well, this is a personal councillor's opinion, that I think that we need to have a discussion about that and be a bit more, take a position. I don't think going out like in this document, and I know it's a draft, but I just prefer it not to be there. That's why I've done this. That's my position. If you don't agree, that's fine.
No, I didn't say one thing.
Yeah,
or the
no,
other.
no, it's okay. It's a fair question, but I have a position, I suppose, but that could change. That could change once we get into detail. For example, I've just learnt there's a border land going through a building out there. So I'm not sort of, into that sort of depth. I'm in those discussions. So,
Can I just clarify something in Councillor Pardon's response? There is actually a preferred option in the document.
Oh, is it?
well,
Yeah.
it says Crown really.
It's at the bottom of page 29, the second last paragraph.
Sorry, yeah.
Given the complexity and unknown level of support of the state, the preferred option is for council to transfer the freehold land to state reserve.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So you could remove just that paragraph.
So it does create a preferred option that's going out for consultation.
I'm happy to speak to the motion. I
I
still.
think, sorry, Jess was
Oh,
next,
sorry,
and then
yeah.
yourself.
Kerry, is there is this time sensitive at all? Is this worth, there's all this talking about buying land and swapping land over in 10 years and so forth, and it sounds like there's some financial ramifications to be thought about here as well, which is no one sitting at the table apart from the CEO. Is this worth deferring in some way, and is this time sensitive? I know it's only a draft and it's going out, but there's some pretty big decisions being made in terms of financially for the council, so...
Well, obviously this is a draft to move through consultation, and the intention being that consultation would occur over the next couple of months and that the final version come back to council early next year. The document, in terms of the need for the documents, it has been on the priority list for both council, state government and the leased organisations for some time, because it's very difficult for them to apply for funding without a master plan in place. So at the moment, for example, we're in discussion with state government over funding, and one of the issues that's coming up is around that tenure arrangement. So it would be absolutely helpful to resolve those issues, to assist those organisations move forward with their investment into their facilities. But obviously, given that we'd still be 4 or 5 months away from a final plan anyway. Our perspective is that if we aren't able to get the approval today or this round to go out to consultation, we would then be waiting until probably February before that would occur. So that would delay us probably 3 or 4 months.
If the land was transferred to the council as trustee, would that resolve these issues where you've got lease boundaries bisecting buildings?
It's not quite as simple. If it was that the sites went to state government and then we became trustee, that would resolve the boundary issue. The other one is more complex because it's potential that the state would require payment for that.
So that's option one, freeholding the land's lease and transferring it to council ownership. That would be council purchasing that.
It may well be, yes.
Is that more aligned with what Councillor Pardon was wanting?
Yes, so obviously that has a different financial implication, both in terms of the capital cost, but also the ongoing costs there. Whereas if it's the other way, then council is trustee and there's leases over to the community organisation. So there are different financial implications, and before we finalise that through to the final plan, there would need to be costing around that.
So I have another question for Councillor Pardon. So in option one, freeholding the land seems to involve council purchasing the land from the state and owning it.
Yeah.
Is that aligned with what you were seeking?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It's reflected there. It's what the outcome you were seeking.
If that was the single option,
yeah,
I wouldn't have said a word.
Okay.
Yeah,
understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aligning this to TAFE's purchases. I'm aligning it to many things council's done in the past, but I don't have the knowledge. So that's why I said take it out, workshop it, and then I'll get the knowledge.
And obviously, this is the draft, so this isn't to approve this for consultation isn't committing council one way or the other. It's a draft document that would be reviewed through the
As
process.
part of the consultation process,
Yep.
do you envisage opportunity to work through these options
Absolutely.
with councillors and stakeholders?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Brian's
Go ahead.
going to speak.
yeah, I actually support the motion still. I've seconded it for the purpose of debate, but I understand what Councillor Pardon's concerns are. I actually think there's a third option that's not there. I understand that one of the complications of the recommended option in there at the moment is that we then, across the whole of the site, get into the complications of secondary use of reserve land. And we had significant debates and discussions about part of this land in the planning scheme. And I read the plan in detail, but I can't remember exactly where the council land is, but I think D&E on the northern side of Mary River Road probably need to be treated quite separately to the rest. I'm also not happy with the concept of paying money out to buy sport and rec land. I just don't think, you know, it's a state and a local government responsibility. I do think the third option is to look at the cheapest and most flexible option to get tenure sorted out, but that's not there. I don't think that excluding these clauses at the moment does anything to reduce the level of reduce the level of information required for consultation to be successful. I think, and I do think, like Councillor Pardon, that perhaps at a council level we do need to have a workshop which sort of looks through all the issues, as well as, you know, some of the assigning in that map 40, etc., of specific areas and uses. I think there may be a good reason to think about it more depth and more longer term before we commit to it in public in a draft format.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go on, Tony.
No, you go ahead.
Yep. The motion before us also recommends removing a map that appears in the draft. In terms of the removal of that map, does that remove essential information in terms of the clubs and where the clubs actually operate from in terms of the overall document?
There is a map in the early part of the document. I would suggest, though, that with this map being removed, we may well need to provide an additional map that makes the tenure clearer.
There's another map on page 36.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does that.
So-
This is Dorothy Dix's.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Dorothy answered this. Another.
Yes.
So, I mean, the question is simply, is there anything in this map that is essential to that map as opposed to what else is in there?
I don't believe so, because this was actually showing where the potential lease arrangements would be once the tenure was resolved, if it had been resolved as one lot, basically.
Ingrid, you had a question?
I think I might speak. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Pardon, for bringing this detail to our attention. I don't think and I've just been learning about it today, really. I don't think I'm going to support this motion as it is written, although I do appreciate the concern about the decision making about how the issues being encountered by the state and council should be dealt with in terms of tenure, and I think that's a valid point that needs work. At the moment, I've got a couple of issues with as it is. One is that, in fact, the document we have before us has been put into the public domain already, so it is a public document, even though it's not the draft approved for consultation. But I'm not totally comfortable with just removing something that's already there. So that's sort of point one. And then the reason for that is that it seems a bit, I don't know. So we show you a little bit and then we remove it again. I feel uncomfortable with that. second one, and I've just tried to search the Land Act, and I don't have time to really do that here at the table. But Councillor Stockwell referred to the meaning of a master plan under the Land Act and the need for consultation. And I'm no expert at the Land Act, but I do recall the extensive consultation that was done for the master plan for the Noosaville foreshore land use master plan, and how important that was for the state land that was, for which council was trustee, which we appear to have some of it like that here. So I'm a bit concerned that, in fact, this does seem to be a thing that will need public consultation, but I don't actually know that. I would believe that needs to be checked. Kerry? You don't know that for sure?
No, I would need to take that on notice,
Okay.
Councillor Jackson.
I'm also thinking that, as I'm not keen on totally removing something that's already there, it might be appropriate to remove the preferred option paragraph, so that instead there might be something like, option 1, option 2, and option 3 being other options or something like that, so that it isn't definitive, because I do agree that there hasn't been a process of clarifying the details of how this would work and what the best stuff. There's no clarity in the document about the details of the preferences and all that. So I think I will, for that reason, I don't think I will support the motion as it is written and a full removal. Yeah.
Tony,
Oh, that's all right, you go.
I have a question. Kerry, just following on Councillor Jackson's comments about the preferred option. Is the preferred option one derived from a stakeholder group or from council staff?
Preferred option has come through the stakeholder group, which include the key stakeholder group, which includes state government, council, and has input, for example, from our property officers and from representatives from each of the leaseholders on site. So
or
that's
sporting clubs on site?
Yes, so it's a specific stakeholder group for those that have a particular interest in the site.
Okay, thank you.
And so that is they are the options that they have looked at and considered as the best options to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Wellington.
I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here, because it's really not that significant in terms of a draft plan that's going out for consultation. The issue will be raised anyway, and so I'm going to support the motion. I certainly do not accept the argument that it's already a public document, we shouldn't change it. Have a look at the changes we just made to the biosecurity plan, from what was a public document last week to what's a public document this week. I mean, often we get recommendations from staff to support documents to go to consultation, and almost inevitably we make some changes before they go out. So the fact that it's on the agenda is neither here nor there. What we're trying to do is refine what we want to present as a potential final document to the public through the draft process. So I have no qualms about changing it, and we might as well just go ahead with Councillor Pardon's wishes, because we can get this process done and we can move on to the next agenda item.
Well, I'll take the opportunity to speak up, listen to everything that Councillor Wellington has, and I've come to the exact opposite conclusion. The reasons being that what I respect about documents like this is that they reflect the work done by the stakeholder groups. And the stakeholder groups are not just our property staff, community development staff, but they also represent the input from all the user groups, that's the community groups, on the site, in particular the Cooroy Sporting Complex and the Noosa Sporting Complex. And I think there's a validation in them seeing the work that they've done and the options that they've come up with in print and reflected, articulated in a document to go out for consultation, to be workshopped further with councillors. I respect Councillor Pardon's view that option 1 is his preferred option, and I'm sure Councillor Pardon would respect also that he's one of many in this equation. A very decisive one is one of the councillors who make the final decision. But given that the work has yet to be done, there's opportunity for public input. There's councillors will have an opportunity to thrash out the cost implications of both these options before a final decision is made, and also for the community to have comment on what's reflected. I think we need to keep these items in to keep faith with the stakeholders, and we've got the work ahead of us, that's for sure. But I'm in favour of keeping these options in as written, and if this motion doesn't get up, I'm in favour of moving the original motion. But the reasons given, I won't be able to support this particular motion. Councillor Glasgow, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion because I like Frank. I like the idea of purchasing land for the foreseeable future. And as a draft, I agree. It can be critiqued when it comes back to us again for the second time. And I always like to look into the future. And I think that a futuristic council now thinks about our land purchases for the time in advance. So we'll be supporting the motion that Frank's put up.
Okay. Councillor Parker, Mr. Close.
Oh, only to say, because I know it's a draft and they're going out to public, I respect all the user groups, absolutely. I happen to chair Tewantin Sports Complex Committee for over 12, they wouldn't even let me, 12 years or more, and I was only a councillor for 11, they wouldn't let me leave, even when I wasn't a councillor. But look, given that there's a recommendation in here that I just can't get my head around at all, given that I just didn't want that to go to public as perceived. We are workshopping, as the Mayor's already said, we workshop many of these, whether they're drafts, etc. We workshop them, and we are here workshopping again. So I didn't want to send that message that we were going to not attempt to purchase or be in the game per se for purchase, because as I've said over the years, I've seen us being council over many years doing deals with the state, etc. And I just think sometimes to send a message out like that, the perception, I just don't like the perception. It's not a reality, but it is a perception, and obviously we workshop it when it came back anyway, but I prefer it not to be in there, Mr. Chair.
Put the motion. Those in favour? Councillors Wellington, Stockwell, Pardon and Glasgow. And those against, Councillors Jackson and Wilkie, and the motion's carried. Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.
The next item up is the Noosa Heads Lions Park Go Noosa Parking Report. Referred for further consideration from the Services and Organisation Committee agenda, page 29. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, John.
Hello, Carl.
But you can't hide down the back there.
Come on out.
First day back at work after. First day back?
I came back on Friday.
Okay, welcome back.
Thank you.
Right. Any questions for staff, councillors?
Just a very small question. Can you please remind me how many car spaces are involved in the lifestyle?
It's approximately 250.
And can you also please, I understand there's some risk of if it's raining, it cannot be used. Do you have some knowledge of the probability of rain at that time of year? I mean, seriously, the Bureau of Meteorology does actually offer it, but I haven't looked.
Well, last Christmas, out of a possible 28 days, it was open for 26. So if it's anything like last Christmas, there was 2 days, but last Easter, I think we only opened for 6 of a possible 14. So
we hope it rains a lot. That's what we need.
And I have a question. If Councillor Pardon's got the idea, would like to see 50% of the takings go to the lines as opposed to 40%. What's the difference in revenue that would involve, please?
So at 50%, I think it's about, let's say it was open for 20 of 26 days, it'd be about $50,000
to the lines?
to council.
To council?
Yeah.
And if
And
at
50,000 to Lions. So.
and so 50,000
So
each.
10% is 50,000 is what you're saying.
Okay, so it's a $100,000 take that you're working on.
So I'm working on $5,000 a day. So if it's 50-50, it would be 2,500 each a day, and then I'm just saying for 20 days, 50,000.
So 50,000 all up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ingrid.
May I ask a follow-up question to Frank, Councillor Frank? Can I ask, I have a recollection that maybe a couple of years ago, we had changed the percentage that Lions received versus council, and we made it 60-40. Can you recall what it used to be? Because I'm pretty sure we actually amended it to become 60-40. Was it?
So I think I have that in the report. So in 2017.
I don't remember the exact date when we changed it. I have a memory that we changed it.
Yeah, so it used to be 40% to council, 60% to Lions Club, and that was on $10 a day. So
Right.
in 2017, we changed it from $10 a day to $20 a day.
Yeah.
And the reasoning of changing that split was just to kind of keep the Lions Club on the similar amount they'd been receiving previously on the $10 amount. So in the report, I have that little table that just talks about at $10 a day, it was 4 council, 6 Lions Club. This is just rough because obviously there's GST and things. And then at $20 a day, that change made it 12 council, 8 Lions Club. So it was that $6, $8 difference for Lions Club.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Stockwell.
I'm going to ask the hard question which we can't answer. We've had 2 separate advices from the Department of Natural Resources in regard to the secondary use of a reserve. My view is the first one was the correct one. The question I have is, in our deliberations about receiving advice, it's our decision, have we included the grounds for why we think it is an acceptable use?
No, we haven't. We're going on the latest advice from DNR in terms of what the letterhead advice, where they wrote to us and said that they have no objection, and we're relying on that letter.
Can I just get clarification of that, because Councillor Stockwell referred to 2. In fact, we had 2 sources of written advice from the department saying that it should not, they would prefer it was not used for parking. Subsequent to that, my understanding is that Hastings Street Association wrote to the department, got different advice, and then you went and clarified it.
Yeah, so effectively the first advice was what I call an email advice from officer, one of their staff. We sought clarification from that. It came on a formal letter advising that they didn't believe the council should be using that for parking. We went back and other Hastings Street, others had checked, and they said verbally that they thought it would be okay. And we said, well, to the department, well, you've given us written saying no, now you're saying verbally. We want to find out once and for all in writing what is your position. And that's what they have written to us. They said that their position is that they would not object to council using this for parking for this Christmas and this Easter.
Sorry, Councillor Glasgow's been waiting.
Yeah, I had that same question on what Tony said. There was a you can use it, then there was a no, you can't use it for commercial purposes and or whatever, or other way around, whatever it was. Yeah. But then there was this argument that the profits weren't going to Joe Smith to build a 3-story villa in Sunshine Beach. They were going to Lions Club and council, which you could argue are very far from profitable organisations, especially council.
We're profitable.
Well, like we're not spending money to go build villas, we're spending money to whatever we get back in the community. So how did that argument come across from them to say, well, actually, this is not a profitable organisation?
The department didn't determine whether or not funds were going to a profit or not profit. The department issue was whether or not it was being used for car parking.
Councillor Wellington.
And just to be clear, Mr. CEO, the department has not given any clearance for this area to be used for parking beyond next Easter at this point in time.
Correct.
Councillor Parton, you wish to move a motion?
Yeah, I'll move, so with the change to 50%, B there, approve, down the bottom, B, yeah, approve 50% of car parking revenue to go to Tewantin Noosa Lions Club, and the remaining revenue to go towards Council Go Noosa initiatives.
Seconded, Councillor Glasgow.
Yeah,
Councillors clear on the changes there? All right, Councillor Parton.
yeah, look, I do so, Mr. Chairman. It's clear in the report on page 32 of the Services Organisation Committee, etc. There's a request from Noosa Lions. They've put in the request, you know, they've added expenses to them, the FPOS, whatever they're paying, the banks, etc. I know there's a cost to that. It seems a reasonable request from a community group. I also understand through history that the Camphor Laurel group at Cooroy also assist the Lions in this endeavour here, and it's a pretty long time now. It's that they man the post down there, and really, if we were paying to man the post, traffic control, etc., if council was paying, there wouldn't be any money to us. I wouldn't think it would be a very expensive exercise. So I think it's a win-win. They, being a charity group and doing the work, I just think 50-50 split is fair and equitable. It was interesting, the question went around before. I think in the future it should be flagged that council take a position on the Tewantin Noosa, on the Noosa Lions Park. I can see confusion with regards to the use of that park. If it wasn't used this year, I could see a lot of people who have used it in history turning up there. I can see problems, etc., regardless of the Go Noosa and what our staff is endeavouring to do. I think somewhere along the line we need to draw a line and get it out there. If this is the last shot, I think we need to take a position on that, so people won't turn up in the future after Easter, whenever we draw that line, and you know, make it well publicised. I really think we need to take that position once and for all. Thank you.
Another Dorothy Dixon for staff. The paid parking that occurs in Lions Park funds other transport initiatives, correct? The 50% or 60% the council receives actually goes towards other transport initiatives over the Christmas and Easter period. It's not going into general revenue, is that correct?
That is correct. We are utilising that funding for the shuttle bus, and the numbers have been put in there about what the cost would be if we were to go with TransLink to use their cost for the shuttle bus has gone up substantially, and so we would be, if we go with a 50-50 split of the funding, we'll be getting close to the limit for where we will be able to cover the costs of that shuttle bus service.
The councillors wish to speak to the motion. Councillor Jackson.
I appreciate the generous concern of Councillor Pardon, wanting to give more opportunity to earn money to the Lions Club, but I actually don't think it is a rational way to use ratepayers' funds. We have high needs to manage traffic and transport in the key tourist areas during these peak periods, and as pointed out by Billingham, there will be something on the agenda later today which is going to cost extra money. So I actually think it's adequate that Lions Club receives 40%. Just looking at the staff report, when they were getting $10 in 2000, was it $10 per car? In 2015-16, they were earning 31,000, and by 2018-19, with $20, they earned almost 50,000. So they've had almost basically a $20,000 increase over 4 years, which I think is a great outcome for them. I don't feel there's evidence that there needs to be further contribution to the Lions Club. Of course, I wish them well and the opportunities to earn. And as I say, I think the funding would be better, the ratepayers' money would be better used by contributing this to the other issues we have with transport.
Thank you. Other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Stockwell?
Yeah. I don't know whether I'm 50-50 or 60-40 on this.
Very good.
I am a little bit conflicted about the way this has transpired. I understand the traders' desire to continue what has been a successful car parking arrangement, but I do look at that being a recreation reserve, and I don't think we should. I'll get to the 50 split later, but I do think that the nexus of that as a recreation reserve, if we're looking at it for the interim parking going forward past next Easter, I think that a good portion of the funds have to go towards recreational improvements of the reserve. I think that's the only way where I can see it as being sufficiently linked to the purpose of the reserve to be a long-term use under the Land Act that is on the up and up. The issue in terms of reward for effort for those who manage it, as I said to Councillor Pardon when he told me he was going to do this, it's always hard to be Scrooge in that regard to a great service organisation that's helped us out immensely over the period of the recent disasters in terms of bushfires. However, I do recall that, and I think Councillor Jackson has put it up, that when we increased the cost, they also got a substantial, that's when we changed the percentages, when we increased the cost to park there. And so I think there is a reasonable reward at 60-40, but as I said, I'll reserve my judgment until I hear any other arguments.
Thank you. So it will be 28 days at Christmas.
Subject to rain.
Subject to rain. And question, just so $5,000 a day?
Sorry, 26 days.
26 days?
Yeah, that's it. It's all sunshine every day.
So that works out to be about $130,000. Take $5,000 a day. 26 days, about $130,000 potential total take. Yeah. Okay. Look, I'll speak in favour of the motion. The potential take $130,000. If it was 50-50, that's $65,000 each. The argument that appeals to me is who's doing the work, who's providing the volunteers to run the car park, monitor the car park, and be there for many long hours during the day. It's a service that may not be there for much longer. They have proven their worth in the way they turned up at the evacuation centres in the recent fires, and they provide great service generally and support for the community. There's no argument that the money won't be well spent. They've invested in the FPOS that help their systems that we've got in place down there at the car park. 60-40 to 50-50, it's potentially a $10,000 difference that the council misses out on. Less if there's if the car park is open for fewer days due to weather. I think the amount is not overly significant for me to want to knock back their request for a 50-50 split. 50-50 is always equitable, especially when it's the group that's doing the work that's making the ask. So on this occasion I'll be supporting the motion, but I do think there's more work to be done about council's long-term position in using green space for car parking long-term in that precinct. But I'll be supporting this particular motion. Councillor Wellington.
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion also. There's community benefit either way. Whichever direction the money goes, there's community benefit, whether it's through Lions or through council. And I think that it's simply a better look for council to do a 50-50 split with the Lions. I think that is more reflective of a good partnership agreement than a 60-40 split where one party obviously dominates. And if we're partnering with them on this, then I'm happy with the 50-50. Did that convince you, Brian?
Well, out of the numbers.
Councillor Glasgow.
Yeah, I support it too. That's exactly right. It all goes back to the community. 60-40, 70-30, 50-50. It always goes back to the community. And on the terms of what Councillor Stockwell said about regeneration of the park, obviously from now in the future, we've got to remember that unlike some festivals that build and then it rains and they stay there, we just don't park the cars if it rains there, remember? So the park will not get as trashed or whatever you had beforehand. So yeah, I fully support it going to 50-50 and it goes back to the community the way I like it.
Okay. Thank you, Jess. Councillor Pardon, you wish to close?
Oh, only, yeah, I will, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Jackson mentioned about rationale. What's the rationale? Well, you're talking about pardon. I mean, rational doesn't sort of cut it in regards to this councillor. I don't know about being rational, but look, councillors will remember, or might remember, this councillor, I'll take the blame. I guess I forced the issue to go from $10 to $20. I remember that debate. I also remember getting defeated 9-1 when I first mooted. We used this facility in about 1999 for parking, and then over time, other councillors, when we were trying to do traffic and transport planning, came on board and ended up in a unanimous decision that we use this particular site. But Councillor Wilkie, as he's just alluded to, and I alluded to earlier, I think we need to send a message out there, Councillor Stockwell as well, with regards to the green space here. We've just spent $50,000, as people are aware. Yes, we get that back through the event. I think it was Food and Wine. Councillor Glasgow, I think, knew all about it. He was there at the event when it rained and chopped it to pieces, and we spent a lot of money and then recouped that money from the event organiser. But having said that, it's in great condition now, and thus when we talk about funding here, and it's mentioned the rain, well, if it rains, and I hope it does, I hope it rains like hell, I think it will, nobody's going to get any money here. So to do a particular, we can go back through history, as been done, see who got what. The fact is, it's a sliding scale here. Might rain for a week, might rain the whole period. So to actually get a financial view of who's going to get what, pretty tough gig, because you're trying to predict the future and the weather, and not even the Bureau can predict that. So yeah, in all of that, I just think, as the Mayor summed up quite well, I think it's a good thing to share. Okay, we through the government make the space available. That's our 50%, plus we put it into our traffic and transport planning, and then the Lions take the other 50. I just think it's a good thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillors, if it's all right with you, while we've got the staff here, can we jump to item 8, the report direct to the General Committee? While we've got them here, the Go Noosa Route 065 shuttle bus loop service. Questions? Ingrid?
Yes, I've got questions. First one is about, it might have been 2 years ago, we experimented a trial of using the Parisian Beach Shuttle, which was a special bus put on because 620 goes all the way to Noosa. And after use of doing that, I think it was over Christmas, staff, you came back and said you evaluated it and didn't feel that, and what that was using the Parisian Beach shuttle, which would go to Hastings Street and Junction, on the same route that is now being put forward as a circuit, so that we experimented with this particular route going around Wyber Road and back up Noosa Drive, and then after experimenting with that, the evaluation was that people weren't using it sufficiently, perhaps. Can you just tell us a bit more about why it was recommended and then council agreed not to continue with that extra route of that previous shuttle?
Yep, so that particular one was an hourly service. People wanting to go back to Parisian were confused because the bus was now going not over the hill, it was going along Noosa Parade and Wyber Road. So that's one of the reasons why there was confusion. It created confusion, and I suppose the other thing is that wasn't necessarily the difference between that particular one and this 065. The 065 is supported by the park and ride element, so having the AFL ground and the J, creating those car parks, whereas that other loop didn't really promote a park and ride, it was just another additional service along that busy route.
Yeah.
Whereas, Councillor,
it was a good idea at the time.
I've got others, but
Councillor Stockman.
Just a point of clarification, from my recollection, when some sort of council added it onto the Parisian loop.
I think it was two of us.
It was actually going in the opposite direction, and part of the reason it was not utilised well was people didn't understand they had to catch the bus from the other side of the road. And in this route going the direction proposed, it'll actually be going through the main bus stop.
Sorry. What's going on with
So, yeah.
And so it won't be HD, it'll be HB, high performing, this bus route compared to the other one with more confidence. Is that right?
Another question. Yeah, so the shuttle bus that's proposed, 065, which would run Junction all the way to Noosa, Wyber Road, Noosa Drive, etc. One of the rationales is that people can use that bus to park at the J. But the J, as I know, is right in the Junction, which is where we have the majority transit of buses traveling down to Hastings Street anyway. So I'm just wondering, why is it that this shuttle bus is being seen as a benefit to parking in the J, given that there are buses running down Hastings Street anyway?
So the J is really a smaller car park. The AFL is the primary one. The J currently, the main transit centre and the Junction down the opposite end, that's where all the buses, that's where people are getting on. There isn't actually a stop near the J. So this is, the closest stop is near the stand-up paddleboard shop. So buses don't currently actually stop near the J.
So this one's going to stop directly
opposite the J.
Because I've taken a bus from the Junction, must be, I don't know where the paddleboard shop is, I don't know the paddleboard, but it didn't seem very far from the corner.
It's on the corner of Arcadia Way there. So where Arcadia Way comes out, just on that
it's not that
side.
far, but yeah, so it's just closer. Yeah, okay. I have another question in general terms, as this is an experiment again, and how is it going to be evaluated?
Just numbers of people again.
Numbers
numbers of people on the buses.
And what about numbers of people parking? Will that be possible to measure?
Well, we'll try and use counts as we have done with Lions Park. We'll try and get those that are measuring at the AFL, how many cars are we getting to utilise it. So we'll have to try and get some metrics that we can, but it will be difficult. But again, it's just how many people are using.
Why is it difficult?
Well, again, because we don't have proper exact counters. It's not like a car park where you can measure exactly. We're going to rely on people to count the people using the car parks. We don't always know that those people using the car park are catching the bus, etc. So, yeah.
Councillor
Dorothy strikes again.
Yes.
just to be clear and for the record, this loop was proposed at a time when we were under the belief that we couldn't use the Noosa Lions car park, the Noosa Lions reserve as a car park, correct?
Yeah.
So this was intended, in fact, to provide an alternative to that car park. Now that that car park is being used, we are still anticipating going ahead with something that was supposed to ameliorate the impacts of not having that car park.
Well, we've also got in the strategy that we will have a Noosa style shuttle bus and we will have a bus on a loop. So this is whether you want to use the word experiment again, regardless of Lions Park, this is still working towards a longer term vision as well, which is worth trialling, irrespective of what's happening with Lions Park.
And associated with this is the sort of little transit lane bus jump.
There's a number of things that we're trialling here. Oh, yeah, again, I think we should proceed with these regardless of what's happening with Lions Park. I think there'll be learnings that will come out of this that will help us make further decisions down the track, aside from what's happening with Lions Park.
Councillor Glasgow.
When I spoke to this about a long time ago, who made the decision for the 10, 11 actual bus stops? Where it stops and where it starts?
It's the existing Transinc bus stops,
Yes, that's
plus
exactly it.
the two temporary ones opposite the J and the AFL ground.
That's all the extras, the extra two, but it's the existing Transit one, that's it.
Yeah.
And you've taken passenger numbers on the 065?
The little counts, yes. Yes.
Councillor
You go.
Ingrid.
Oh, okay. Just checking, from having read the report, I understand the request is to pay 116,000 just for the Christmas period, whereas previously, when I went to the previous approval in October, it was for both Easter and Christmas to have this particular shuttle, and we approved both. So I'm just wondering what happened.
So we actually had two figures in that previous report. We had 65,000 for Christmas and a draft of 23,000. Yeah.
Got it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're saying 116 just for Christmas.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And we're not putting in the motion anything for Easter for this shuttle.
Do we have that price
We
yet?
don't. They haven't given us.
You don't have a price.
Those two quotes, initial quotes from Transinc, and then they've given us a revised price for Christmas. They haven't given us the revised price for Easter.
So just to clarify, to fully understand, so council has already approved in principle doing the Easter circuit, but at the moment we can only amend because we only have the Christmas price. We're only being asked to amend the price, approve the price change, but we're not being asked to.
No, we'll have to wrap that up when we know the price for Easter.
You have to come back.
We'll have to come back again. It's unfortunate that we've only getting the price now, so late, and we don't have the Easter price. So it's we can only provide the information we have at this stage.
So can I just understand something perhaps from the CEO, and this is theoretical, but say council felt it was too much money and didn't want to go ahead, but they've already made a decision in principle. Are we in some way, what is the situation? I mean, are we obliged to do this thing or not?
No, I don't. I think the council could, if they wish to, revisit that decision if the price was, in the council's view, unreasonable. What we agreed in principle was that's what we wanted to achieve, but we didn't know the price at that stage.
So for example, I'm just being kind of devil's advocate here, but for example, if the motion which was to accept the 116,000 was not agreed to, a different motion could be put up to say we're not going to run it. No. Okay.
So we can do that for the Easter service, for example.
Yes, and that's probably more cogent when we get to the Easter one. So say if we run the Christmas service and it doesn't get good take up and we get a price that's outrageous for the Easter service, then the council will probably say, well, it's not worth it in those circumstances. But you know, I expect it'll be successful. We'll have figures that will tell us that at that point.
We're not locked into Easter, running an Easter service.
No, we've got a council decision at the moment saying that we do want to run an Easter service, but we don't have a price for that at this stage.
Councillor
I'm going to move it.
Moved Councillor Wellington, seconded Councillor Glasgow.
I still have a question. Oh, sorry, no, I can't ask a
Not
question,
now.
so you've got to speak.
That's why.
I move it because I think we need to move on. This has been discussed for years, in fact, operating this loop service on this very pathway. And indeed, I recall back at our very first workshop of this council, when we were looking at big pictures, I raised the prospect of even having this exact same loop as a one-way service for vehicles of all types, one lane being dedicated to alternative transport and buses and the other to private vehicles. So we're kind of part way there with this, and it has been discussed on and off, and I think it's about time we found out whether or not it's going to be part of an acceptable solution to some of our traffic issues. And indeed, the bus jump lanes are also part way towards considering whether or not transit lane type arrangements are going to be an assistance. So if nothing else, yes, it's going to cost us more, but the information gathering, I think, is going to be really, really useful.
Thank you. Councillor Pardon?
Yeah, I'll support the motion, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the Aussie Rules ground, I can go way back to the old council when we used to use that pick-off point there, loop. So nothing new here, except probably the Mayor's point with regards to his idea, refined off old ideas that the old council had discussed way back with regards to traffic and transport. Noosa, the #1 problem we have, and it's just going to get harder daily as it does to move around our shire, and of course at Christmas and Easter it's 10 times as hard. Just a question of staff, are the seats going to be removed, so the surfboards and eskies just behind the driver to get them on instead of trailers? Is there any thought of that, or it was discussed at certain times? So you know, we're going to pull a seat. Maybe it was us. No.
The TransLink buses already accommodate.
They're right.
Yeah.
Plenty of room. I remember in our discussion. Sorry, we were looking at that. This once again is another trial. I would hope that the council would be moving much faster and further forward after. Certainly Christmas, and then assuming the Easter trial goes ahead. We talk about ideas, there's a lot of them out there. I'm way down the track with regards to traffic and transport, but I'll wait till the election campaign before I'll take my position, because I do have a position, and I think as a council I'm getting frustrated at the timing, etc., of these opportunities that I see, especially with regards to technology and the way we can move forward here. So I'll just sit on my frustration with regards to that. The staff continue, we get report after report, and they're all good reports, but I just think we want to move a little faster in the direction of looking at the big picture, traffic and transport in this shire, because we keep doing these trials, but I think we can do other big picture stuff and move a lot quicker, because there's words and deeds, and I think we need more deeds. Now, we do have councillors here on working groups, so I'm not privy to where there's discussions in that working group, the traffic and transport group is, where they're up to at this point in time. Probably this report tells me where they're up to at this time. They're doing this trial. But I do get frustrated. This is terrific, but I think we could have moved a lot faster on some of this stuff, because when I go through it, we talk about our own. It seems to me we'll never get our own transport. They'll throw everything in front of us to stop us even looking at the path of owning it. We talk about small buses. It says on page 8, small buses, trial small buses, opportunities. Then there's the risk, people might be left waiting, etc. If you have enough of them, they won't be left waiting. But the state, when you go down, floor, DDA compliant, time constraints implement, agreement with department, etc., etc. If we want to brand our bus, the coconut bus, and have that Noosa style, if you go to branding at the top, Go Noosa branded bus, not guaranteed to stay on route 065. So as I go through the opportunities and then the risk, it seems to me that this is going to be a very hard sell to the department, regardless of where flavour of the month. So if we're going to do a trial, we need to shake the government up and get serious. Thank you.
Councillor Park.
I still do have another question. Just the previous resolution or motion that councillors approved involved reducing the income revenue for council from Lions Park. Previously, the report before us about this shuttle bus was that the existing budget for the shuttle at Christmas was 65,000, and that given the cost was 116,000, and the Lions Park revenue was expected at the time to be 60,000, that we would end up having to pay 51,000 that was covered by that 65,000 budget. So as we were doing this rather in the middle of meetings, but I'm a little unclear, what is the Lions Park revenue to council going to be now that it's been changed? It'll be 65,000? No.
If it's the full day.
Well, it
If
depends
it's
on
the
26
full-
26
days.
days.
The thing
It could be up to
about it.
65,000. It could still cover. Is
Yes.
that what?
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't change the cost. Yeah. So, okay. Well, I guess I'll speak then. I'll support the motion. I think that the extra cost is unfortunate, and of course, but you know, the council idea of testing, experimenting with a route and some parking is a good one as a test. I believe AFL grounds have been used previously as a trial. I do note that the transport strategy, which is approved by council in 2017, specified the concept of park and ride in what is called transport corridors. And of course there are some important corridors coming, which day trippers use, coming from Cooroy through the motorway or the Cooroy Noosa Road. There are also the David Low Way. And we are not actually addressing what was intended, and this is some of my frustration, Councillor Pardon, that we're not actually addressing the incoming cars on the transport corridor. We're placing a shuttle on a circuit in the middle of Noosa that goes around in a circle, and I'm not sure how that actually addresses the intent of the transport strategy and the issue of the day trippers coming in through those transport corridors. Nevertheless, I'm supportive of the experiment, and let's see how it goes.
Councillor Stockwell?
I understand Councillor Pardon's frustration, but I also understand that the process we've gone through has really identified that changing public transport is like doing a U-turn in an aircraft carrier. It's a very long and convoluted process, and I suppose what we've come to have a better appreciation of is just the level of state government support and subsidy of public transport, and why they have a keen interest in making sure that any changes don't make their situation worse. I think this is a good salutary lesson for council as well, in terms of if we decide to go further down this path of the likely costs of a shuttle, and it'll be interesting to see. To me, it'll come back not to the overall cost, but the cost per passenger. Did a quick maths, and I think it works out. If it's 43 days, this is just under $3,000 a day. So I'm guessing we'll be doing a subsidy per user of the service from somewhere between $1 and $2 per person, which is not significant if we can take that number of cars off the road. But to me, yeah, it is a very useful trial. It'd be good to get as good a monitoring data as we can. It'll be interesting if we can get some qualitative data around the experience and you know, we have done in previous ones, separated out on the people that do the park and ride or do just use it from home. It would be very useful to understand what is it that drives the behaviour of catching this versus the normal route, and because that might inform what we do going into the future. Because from my perspective, you know, highly desirable to have this loop running 365 days of the year.
Yeah, look, I fully support it too. Councillor Parter's not the only one that's frustrated. I myself am. Like, it seems like transport is like doing a U-turn on an aircraft carrier, but just turn the wheel harder and do it sharper, because it seems to be taking a long time to get anything done in this space. And I fully support this happening. It's going to be great for both tourists and locals alike. It's going to move people around. You know, it's a great frustration here in Noosa. I just read quickly on Google then that you know, 37% of people in Melbourne have used public transport in the last 3 to 7 times a week. You know, I think in Noosa you probably put a point between that 3 and 7 here, wouldn't you? Because it's just no one really gets under. We're so different by nature here, in the fact that our public transport system and who operates it is very unique and different, and it has been a slow process. And I look forward to seeing the stats on this, and I am going to ride this bus every morning, and I'm going to put my surfboard on when the surf's pumping, and we're going to go out at the bar on the back as well. So yeah, fully support it.
Yes, I support the motion for this shuttle bus service. It's worth noting that there is no one silver bullet to the complicated issue of traffic moving people around Noosa, especially at the holiday times. It's been identified as a problem since the 1970s. There were newspaper articles about this being an issue, especially at holiday times, and we're making a concerted effort to really understand the dynamics of traffic and people movements. And it's not as simple as we may have thought at first. It's true that we have radically increased the number of people accessing these hotspots by means other than cars than any previous council. There are record numbers of people accessing Main Beach, for example, via this free bus services, walking or cycling, for a very tiny reduction in car numbers. So it shows that the dynamic isn't what we initially thought, but that there's a lot more work to do. This sort of service is run in conjunction with things like a roadside signage, which all motorists can read, particularly those, well, especially including those coming from outside the Shire, the day trippers. It gives them real-time information on parking availability in congested precincts, which allows them to make informed decisions about whether or not they continue on, take their chance getting a park, or jumping on a free service such as this one. It's worth also saying that the entire loop is in effect a place where motorists can park and access the loop from anywhere, any point on that loop. I'm particularly interested to see how the queue jumping lanes will work, which will allow the bus to bypass.
Point of order, that's not the item that's in front of us.
The shuttle bus service is running in conjunction with the
queue jump.
Well, it is, but what's in front of us is simply the 116, approving the 116,000.
That's true, it's about the shuttle bus loop.
It's about the money. The loop's been decided.
Yes, that's true, but I'm very curious to see how it will operate, and the question was raised about how it will be monitored. I too am very curious to see how it will be monitored, and in particular the part that the bus queue jumps play in the operation, the uptake of the service. I applaud the staff's efforts in this. There's been, of course, things we would like solutions to be found more readily, but moving TransLink towards a shift in thinking takes time, and I appreciate the work the staff have done to getting TransLink to this point in trialling services such as this, and I'll be very interested to see how it goes, and thanks for your work. Councillor Wellington, wish to close?
Yeah, look, I appreciate everyone's frustration, and the staff are frustrated also. You know, I would refer anyone who happens to be watching this or on our website to go back and look at the reports that came to the last round of meetings, which very superbly detailed the frustrations that we have in dealing with public transport, because the state has a monopolistic death grip on transport here, and we simply can't interpolate our own desires into that public transport system without their approval. And in that regard, I do want to congratulate staff who've been successfully so far working with TransLink and the state government to introduce initiatives that they would much prefer ignore. Yes, it's frustrating that we can't work faster, but we do not control public transport. We have zero control over public transport. All we can do is try and influence it. And staff, in creating this link and convincing TransLink to come along for the ride, excuse the pun, have done us proud in many ways, because it wasn't an easy negotiation. TransLink were resistant, and instead we've come up with at least a part of a solution which is moving us towards what we all idealise. And what we idealise can only be achieved by maintaining good relations with the department and with TransLink, not by badgering them and being largely judgmental. So it is a slow process, it is a frustrating process for everyone, but it's a process there is no real alternative to if we're going to improve public transport in the Shire.
Thank you. Put the motion, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Carl, Joe and Adam.
Yeah.
Well done, Joe.
Thank
You've been
you.
singled out.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next item 5, construction of Hilton Terrace and Ernest Street, Tewantin intersection corridor upgrade. From the Services Organisation Committee agenda. It is a big project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have declared a perceived conflict of interest in this matter.
Yep.
As I am an owner of the property at Noosa Lake Resort, and I'm the chairman of the Noosa Lake Resort Body Corporate, and the intersection works roadworks extend across the frontage of the Noosa Lakes Resort site. I believe I do not believe I'd have a direct benefit, however, that I do believe it raises perceptions of conflict of interest, and I will elect to leave the room for the purpose of debate and decision on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell.
And it's time for coffee.
Yep.
That'd be the reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a long.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Carl. Can you, given that this is it's a major project, can you just give us some idea on the steps that the contractor will be taking to deal with the delays in traffic involving any any night works?
Yep, we've engaged RoadPro to assist us with that. We've done, to date, we've done some information in the papers. We've letterbox dropped the residents affected, so we've tried to give people plenty of notice. There will be night works involved, so the asphalt works will be at night. And also, the intent is to keep it one lane open at all times, so there'll be traffic control, but traffic will still be flowing. There'll be delays, but it will be flowing in both directions.
There's no getting around. It's going to be a difficult project from a traffic perspective.
Yeah, Councillor Wellington.
It's a 4-month construction period. What's the expected start date, please?
I think it was just after 28th of January, or just after the peak holiday period, so we want to get in as soon as possible. Yeah.
And it is currently a T intersection, and was suggesting a roundabout. I couldn't see in the map of the design. It's a bit small for my eyes. How many lanes will be the roundabout be?
My understanding is that they alternate, so it's coming along Hilton Terrace heading west. It would break out into 2 lanes, so there'd be a slip to the left, straight through. Similarly, coming from along Ernest Street heading north, it'll break out into 2 lanes. There'll be a left turn and a right turn there. And then similarly, coming from the west heading along Hilton Terrace, similarly it'll break out into 2 lanes. There'll be a straight through on the left and then a right turn. And
will there be a cycle lane with all those approaches as well?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Right. And currently an intersection going to a roundabout. Can you speak? You're knowledgeable in these areas. Speak why, just tell us why a roundabout means better traffic flow at this intersection as a result.
So this intersection's been identified in our traffic study as our #1 congestion spot. We've also had a motorcyclist killed there a few years back. There's long delays for people heading east on Hilton Terrace turning right into Ernest Street. There's long delays for people turning right out of Ernest Street into Hilton Terrace. Also, we've had 2 deaths in that corridor at pedestrian crossings, and as part of this roundabout, it'll act as a slowing point within that corridor. We've also dropped the speed limit down to 50 kilometres an hour. So it'll almost act as a traffic calming or a traffic regulating measure within that corridor.
I might ask, just because you have mentioned the recent deaths, and they're quite recent, given that we are well aware that roundabouts are actually not good for bike riders or pedestrians, can you explain where the pedestrian crossings will be, especially over the larger roads being Hilton Terrace? Yeah.
Yep. So there's 2 existing pedestrian crossings, one near the Lakes Resort and another one further up near
Big Palms.
Yeah.
Towards the bowl. Yeah.
Oh,
Towards the bowls.
Yeah. So they're existing.
Yeah.
As part of this upgrade, there'll be pedestrian refuges on all legs.
Okay.
So on Hilton Terrace West, Hilton Terrace East, and Ernest Street South.
So in the vicinity of the
yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I should probably also just mention that the bridge across Danella Creek will still be open. So so active transport during construction phase will still be able to go across that bridge. So if people choose not to drive through there in their car, they will still be able to walk across or go on their bikes.
Just one move, Councillor Glasgow. I've got one more question. Given January 26th is the start date, what's your community?
Sorry, I'll correct that. Apologies if I have it. It'll be as soon after 28th of January. So it'll be the Australia Day weekend, which is a peak time for us.
Yes.
So it'll be as soon as possible in February, early February.
And what's your communication plan around that?
Yes.
In the lead up to work starting, how do you plan to inform the community?
Yes. So as mentioned previously, we've engaged Road Pro to come up with a communication plan and assist us with that. There'll be information in the papers. There'll be VMS boards. There'll be information provided to people directly impacted, and we'll get information out to the hospital, the fire, and any emergency vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Move, Councillor Glasgow. Seconded, Councillor Parton. Wish to speak to it, yes?
Oh, not much more than just it's a much needed roundabout, and grateful for seeing it for now and for the future. As you said, there's been a lot of fatalities there in the last wee while, and it's just a great project. So thank you, both of you.
Councillor to speak to it, Councillor Parton.
Yeah, look, I will, Mr. Chairman. The cost of this, where we started, where it is today, it's enormous cost to this roundabout. But there's more to it than just the roundabout. It's about car parking at Tate Duke House. It's about finishing off the good chap end, pedestrianising, etc. And as mentioned by staff, there's been 2 deaths, and the roundabout does act as a shock absorber per se, if you like, there. So, and a reduction in the speed limit. So, safety is paramount, of course. The costs are enormous, and I've said it before, and I've flagged it before, that when we go into these particular jobs now, we have, with regards to infrastructure that's underground, etc., the unknown costs. We talk about NBN, Telstra, Unity Water, etc. And obviously I keep saying that we've run into a new business model where you can't go anywhere else. You have to deal with Telstra or NBN, etc. They own that infrastructure, and it costs a fortune, over $1 million before you start just moving or getting them to move their gear around. So as we work along around the Shire, we're going to have to start to factor those things into our costs going forward, because you learn as you go, and this one's a beauty. Also, starting in work virtually February, the dangers here are obvious. You know, middle of the wet season, beginning, end, who knows? So timelines are paramount in the fact that, you know, that road, the major arterial road through there, we don't have many roads coming into Noosa, and there will be disruption. There's absolutely will. And if we get into rain as well, I saw that road constructed by Main Roads. They dug down and they were pumping out of the water. Once you go down a bit anywhere in there, you strike water, the water table, Noosa River's just there, and just tidal, big tides through those months will be enough to deal with, because we have drainage issues as well. So really, I thank my staff, but there's been a multitude, if the public are wondering, there's been a multitude of problems with regards to this particular. This is very complicated work at this intersection, and dealing with the various, you know, Telsters, etc. It's been expensive and very hard job, and once again, I'd just like to thank my staff, but we can't colour this one. It's a toughie for all those reasons, but we can just ask our people for patience and see how we go. We'll do our best. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? You wish to close, Jess?
No, it's all been said.
All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Tony.
Councillor Stockwell.
Thanks, guys.
Councillors,
Thank
if
you.
it's
Thanks.
all right, can we take a 5-minute
Micturation break?
Micturation break. So we'll adjourn the
Not to ruin the nice.
Okay, we're live again, councillors.
So you put enzymes
Thanks,
and
Mark.
stuff. Yeah.
That was one of my first jobs. I was Jockholm, which was a Swedish compost activator.
All right, councillors, we're back. Meeting's open again. We're up to item 6, which is the Noosa Council Annual Report, referred here for the significance of the issue, and welcome. Yeah.
Hello. Trent was here. He was, however, that's fine.
Right. But yeah, any questions for Deborah or the CEO about the annual report, councillors?
Bit of light reading.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can move to the motion.
Oh, I did have a question, sorry. And it's one of clarification. And I'm sure the CEO will know the answer to this, but I did prep our director on this one. In the financial criteria of the annual plan, there's 2 that are down as being moderate results, which appear to have been actually overperformance. So in the operating surplus, we made a 11.6% surplus, which is reported as a moderate, whereas then you look down and same with the asset sustainability ratio, we actually were 132% as moderate result, whereas they look like in fact they're moderate because they're exceeding the range, and
Too good.
They're too good. Are there any real concerns at the level of actually achieving 11.6 surplus or 132% asset sustainability ratio? Is there any significant concerns that would really? Well, I know, but yeah, other than having an orange being moderate, isn't it really a good result?
Fantastic.
Councillor, yes, obviously a operating surplus is a good result, as is obviously exceeding asset sustainability ratio. The QAO set guidelines in terms of an upper and lower limit on a lot of our sustainability indicators, and the idea is it obviously gives the readers an opportunity to understand that whilst from a long-term perspective we try to stay within that range, there's always years there'll be peaks and troughs. For sustainability ratio, it might be a year that we have a large spend on bridge renewals or something like that. With our operating surplus, the key drivers, and you'll see that come through in the December report the Director of Corporate Services will do, is one of the key things is that with our levies, our charges, any unspent monies are constrained and put aside in restricted cash in the one financial year. So whilst that will be built into the operating surplus, that unspent money is, if you like, set aside for capital purposes. So we will have years where one of the key drivers for that surplus being higher than expected is we actually haven't spent our entire levy. Good example being the environment levy, where we would put that funds aside for future capital expenditure. So it's not a bad outcome in this case, but we need to make sure that we're clear that it is obviously above the threshold and shows as an orange track.
I'll just add to that. I had calls last week to read the report by the consultants in the Moreton Bay Regional Council, which is really interesting because they've had some real problems down there and a range of issues. And one of the things, when you have a look on the surface, a lot of their ratios look very good. In fact, they were way above this. Their operating surplus was around about 25%. So what that tells you is that they were probably financially saving a lot of money, but skimping on the services, and that then flowed through to a lot of their maintenance of their assets and so on, and a lot of their other issues. So financial indicators are one indicator, and I said these are a very good set of numbers, but if you have, for example, in my case, if that operational surplus was 20 or 30 or something percent, it probably means you're either overrating or not delivering. You're getting a financial result without the other. So you do need to look at the context of it. And that report has said into Moreton Bay Regional Council was an interesting read about how they put too much emphasis on that and not enough on the service delivery.
Ingrid,
I won't move it.
You won't move it?
Change my mind.
Okay.
I'll move it.
Moved,
I'll
Councillor
second.
Wellington, seconded Councillor Parr. Councillor Wellington.
No, nothing to say. It's all in the report.
Yeah,
Councillor Parr.
yeah, just from me, thank you to the CEO for his guidance on the staff and the work that they put into this year. It's, to me, reading through, terrific result. and annually when we get these reports and you have a look through, you think, how did they achieve that many things? And I guess for us it's easy I say it's easy. Sometimes decision making isn't easy, but we sit here and make these decisions, you know, go and build a $6 million boardwalk, you know, go and build a bridge, do this, do that. And we tick off on the funding and away they go. But someone has to deliver it and do all the work behind the scenes and the details. So at my end, I find, you know, easy to say in most instances, not all, go and do the work. And then the work happens, and at the end of the year, we get together and the staff pulls, the CEO and staff, Deb, pull it all together. And when you run through it, it's terrific result and terrific effort. And I take the CEO's remarks before with regards to other councils. There was a council not far north of us that always financially looked so strong when we compared. And yes, well, meanwhile, the roads are starting to break up and things are going wrong. So you can look $1 million if you don't spend it, or you can have $1 million if you don't spend it. But the point is, you know, once again, we're $30 million capital works. I forget what we delivered, 28 or something, near enough last year, etc., etc. So you have to deliver on all fronts. We have our social team downstairs working with the community. We have an environment team working across the Shire, and thus the balance, and then our business units, etc. Staff in finance, keeping a tight rein on councillors like me who might want to spend more money than we have, for good things, I might add. But yeah, look, in the big picture, you read through this document and it's a good read. I'd recommend people that are bored out there, citizens with nothing to do over the Christmas holidays, look it up online and have a read. Because we get picked off a lot in the community and we're an easy mark. You know, who likes politicians or governments anyway? Nobody does. We understand that. I've understood since I was elected. We rate somewhere below second-hand car salesmen in the big picture out there. But it's a good read, and you can see it, that at least your elected members and the staff that are employed here, the CEO, etc., have a real crack. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll speak. I think what it does show is that 2018-19 was another stellar year, and from a perspective of an elected representative, the annual report tells me that this organisation has hit its straps once again this year. I remember that this time last year the CEO suggesting that we were unlikely to get another report card this good for a while, whereas I think this is equal to the previous year. I think the key for the community is your top 10 highlights, and it's all about delivery. You know, delivery of your ringtail U-roll, delivery of the draft planning scheme and consultation process, a 40% increase in free bus service use, the new boardwalk, the environment strategy. That's the first 5. There's so many things that have been achieved that sets this community up in a really good way for the future. And to me, when you look at the other indicators within the plan and how it's been reported, you can see that it's done in a way that managed to also be fiscally responsible, and we paid back $10 million. So there's all these really big highlights in the last financial year, and it is one that I suppose we can be proud of, but more importantly that the staff who get to deliver our lofty decisions and implement it and come up to us with the well-researched and professional recommendations and reports, that really it is their effort and their professionalism and their commitment to doing the right thing for this community and keeping the long term in their sights, which I think this report well and truly exemplifies. So well done.
Councillors wish to speak? I'd like to say for any interested community member out there, any resident or ratepayer who wants to know how their rates money is being spent or what the Noosa Council actually does during the year, I recommend, and even if you're bored, as Councillor Harder said, the annual report is very, it's worth reading. And you read a document like that, it's worth reminding yourself that we are only a small council, a limited budget, but one, due to its financially responsible practices, is effectively delivering multiple services on a daily basis. I think at page 29 it outlines how many transactions it conducts on a yearly basis. There are millions of them, as well as delivering major projects like the Bridging Digital Hub, where on a weekly basis you can see school students, that's the next generation, learning how to use IT to shape their futures, design their own future. The Noosaville Library refurbishment, which is beautiful work. The beautiful boardwalk to the National Park. The creation of the Environment Strategy and Action Plan, which was created in consultation with the people who are doing the work on the ground in the Shire, and will provide the framework for more of that good work into the future. The transport strategy initiatives that have seen record numbers of people choose to get to Main Beach by bus, walking or cycling for the first time. Record numbers, rather than using the car. And as mentioned previously, only a small reduction in car numbers, so we've obviously got more work to do there. And also as a demonstration that rates are collected not just for growing the bureaucracy, but for injecting funds back out into the community. About $900,000 worth of that money went out back into the community in the form of community grants. Close to 30 million back out into the community in the form of capital works, which is about maintaining the assets, improving the assets, upgrading the assets, and building new assets for residents to enjoy. Not to mention paying off $10 million worth of debt, which was inherited at de-amalgamation, while still returning an operating surplus of about $5.6 million, and all the while limiting rates rises to CPI. And that is a discipline that this council has imposed on itself and is still able to deliver all these other services and projects for a community. And it does make it a pleasure and a privilege to be part of a council like this. But as said previously, it's one thing for councillors to make decisions, but someone has to do the hard work, and the annual report, if anything, is a credit and a testament to the Noosa Council staff's hard work. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion?
I'm just going to add a tiny little thing, so thank you for the various things people have pointed to in the annual report, but I'd also like to thank the people who have put together this report. A huge amount of work and a very attractive and well put together document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warrington, you wish to close?
I'm very fortunate in my position that I often get to sing the praises of council, so no, I won't speak to it at any length, and I get to write the introduction, of course, to the document. But you know, I will say that this is a remarkably successful council that does punch above its weight, that does deliver for the community in so many ways, and it is a great honour to serve this community. Thank you.
Put the motion. Those in favour? That's Wellington. I'll just say it's unanimous. Just create a bit of suspense there. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, we now move on to the Budget Review 2, the 2019-20 financial year, on page 9 of the General Committee agenda. Any questions for Trent, councillors?
Through you,
Frank.
Mr. Chair, just one. On page 14, buildings and facilities there, down the bottom of 14 there, you've got recovery of Unity water charges for Noosa. Is that Surf Life Saving Club or something? SLS?
Correct, councillor. So it's been ongoing. It's not a change in service level or any change in process. It's purely a recovery line that we omitted or missed, if you like, from our original budget. Fortunate finding, obviously, for us to recognise that we had missed it, so it funded some of our emergent items for this year.
Yeah, that's okay. Just an add-on question to that, a supplementary, if you like. Just explain how that works, because I would have thought they paid the water bill, the club, so they pay it, I'm assuming. How does it work? Just
I'll correct your notice if I'm wrong, Councillor, but it's my understanding that the water meter being on council land parcel is paid by us in the first instance.
Oh, I see.
We recover it.
Oh, yeah, we recover it. That's okay. I just trying to work out how they would.
That's why it's got a negative in front of it. That means they're going to pay us.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And they're trying to reduce it by putting less water with the scotch.
So, question on page 14 is, well, just so I understand what we're looking at, the environmental services, additional flying fox monitoring, an extended sprinkler system in Wallace Park. That's an expense that we've incurred and hadn't budgeted for, is that correct?
Correct, that's an emergent item that was put through executive team for consideration for additional flying fox work to manage the flying foxes on site.
The monitoring, is that basically paying for staff time, is that what it means?
There's a combination, so that cost is there's a combination of sprinkler system.
So switching it on or installing more?
It's my understanding installing more.
Yeah, just I can't remember which end it was. It's just a minor extension to where it is, because that would actually make a big difference.
Okay.
Yeah. And staff time for monitoring.
Yes. So
doing more regular monitoring of the numbers.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's a question I can ask the environmental staff. Yep. It suggests there's more numbers there than.
I think they're moving further
closer
down to the hospital and houses, and I think they blasted them out of there with water.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Encourage them.
Any other questions for staff, or otherwise we have a motion there?
I'll move it.
Moved Councillor Pardon, seconded Councillor Jackson. Councillor Pardon, would you speak to it?
No, just to thank Trent
Yeah.
for all his work and his staff, of course.
Yeah.
Once again, we're in a good position.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No. Put the motion, those in favour. Carried unanimously. And the last item is the financial performance report for October on page 27.
I've got a couple of questions.
Oh, sorry, Ingrid. Yeah.
That's all right. Okay. I'm actually looking at operating revenue on page 28, and that's about local laws fees, 23,000 above year-to-date budget, 58%. In one quarter, we've already received 58% of the amount expected to get for the year. Do we have an indication of why that is?
Local laws as a branch or service department of council includes a range of things. What primarily comes through in the first quarter of the year are a lot of the licenses. So dog registrations, food licenses. The remainder of the revenue obviously relates to any biannual charges or infringements, which is we profile that budget during the year.
But there's a particularly large number coming at the beginning, in the first part of the year for the reason. Okay,
correct.
Thank you for
And so any variation we have year to date is purely about more dogs than we expected, and permits than we expected, and just that slight increase.
Yeah. Thank you. I do have another one. For the CEO, I seem to be starting to channel Councillor Jerusalem here. Actually, it's not the training one, but last time I asked about the expenditure on permanent staff salaries and how that was lower than expected, and then the overtime being higher than expected. And I notice it's the same again this time. So I'm wondering, is this just, is this a 2-month blip? Are we having less staff, permanent staff at the moment with needing more overtime? Or is this actually something we will see every month anyway?
I'll dig into that a bit more for you offline and check that out, but we fund in the budget all of the staff, the permanent staff that council's approved. So if there's people who have left and they haven't been appointed, or we had new positions haven't been filled, that's why you always see I call it the unders, that those positions wouldn't have been filled yet. I'll need to check some more detail on that employee overtime, unless you can add to it.
It's my understanding there's a portion of that is the fires, which would have been showing in the figures for the last month's worth of figures. That's right.
Yep.
Any overtime associated with the latest round of disaster events would not be showing in these numbers. So you will likely see for next month, you'll see another blip in the numbers.
Okay.
And obviously, as Brett stated, a lot of the underspend and permanence is the vacancies or the transition time for those new positions we agreed in the budget to come on board.
So it's just so again, that's more of a it's not an ongoing, obviously people leave and we need to hire new people throughout the year. And I would have thought that was just business as usual and the budget would somehow be stable, but.
Yeah, so there's two elements to it. One is if we create a new position in the budget and that position is funded from 1 July, but the person, by the time we advertise, recruit, they might have to resign or whatever, they might not start for 2 or 3 months, and that funding is not spent, and that's why you'd be under. The other scenario that would arise would be Fred Bloggs or Sally Smith resigns on the 1st of November. We then have to go through an advertising period, and that position might be.
Well, that would be a normal. Well, both of those in some ways are normal.
Yeah.
But the budget is always then above the actual staffing levels.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have a motion there, and
I'm happy to move. Second.
Ingrid, seconded. Jess. Wish to speak to it, Ingrid?
I don't really wish to speak to it. I think it's satisfactory report, and again, I appreciate that and his team and the work that's gone to inform us. Thank you.
Yeah, just a note on page 34, and well, I'll start with a question. Where the Queensland government's lost an A rating, and when we've met with QTC people, advisors and that, so that cost, the question, so that cost, in my opinion, but you can answer, was passed on to all local councils in Queensland, the increase rate that they have to borrow at. Is that correct? The Queensland Treasury have to borrow an increased rate.
Correct. So any change in the credit rating at the state level will obviously in turn affect the rates that we can borrow and invest in with QTC.
Yeah. So conversely, if you cashed up, I would think that puts you in a better position, because interest rates, if they've got to borrow higher, and this question comes out of the graph where we are investing heavily now with Queensland Treasury Corporation because of return, I imagine.
Better than the bank.
Yes, better than the bank. Yep. So is that a fair estimation of things?
If, as always, Frank, it's the difference between what you borrow at and what you invest at is the pain factor or the benefit factor, depending whether you're cashed up or debt, for high debt. So it's no different to you and I at home. If you have a mortgage, not much money in the bank, then you want interest rates to be low. If you're a retiree who's paid off their house and you've got money in the bank, you want interest rates to be high. Yeah. It really depends on where you are in your life cycle. It's a bit the same for councils. So.
Yeah, I just thought, given they've got to pull a lot of money and they borrow international, wherever they can get money at the best rate, that's a QTC. So I wondered if they have to offer more to attract that money. If they've lost an A, if they lose another A, I imagine it costs them more. Otherwise, how do you attract funds? That, I guess I was looking at our analogy. Thus, we benefit if we've got cash, I would think, to put in, because they want to attract our investment funds back to them.
Councillor, you'll find that if you just consider from commercial banks' perspective, you'll find that in many cases, your lower rated banks and institutions will offer a marginally higher rate.
Yeah.
And the reason is the larger banks don't need the money because more people are investing with them, and they've still got liquidity to offer that in turn as investments as they need to. And obviously there's a high risk associated with those smaller institutions. And with QTC, one of the key pressures is availability of cash to then reinvest in other activities. So their demand for cash is higher. So that's what we're finding at the moment is the larger institutions are offering us a lower rate.
Yeah.
And the smaller ones in QTC are offering us a higher. Why at present Bendigo's the only non-QTC investment we have. But we've seen the last few weeks a trend where Heritage and Suncorp and some of those smaller A2 and A3 institutions are offering a marginal rate. So that's where we're getting them the better return at the moment. And in terms of what we do with our debt, as Michael alluded to last month, we'll reassess the position for our debt borrowings and the appropriate utilisation of our surplus cash in the coming months again, and do so each year.
So just a question on that. So, question, how, I know we at least owe another 10 million at 6.2. What's the total? I don't really know that. It's got to be somewhere around that. So what's the total at 6.2 that we're locked into that we still owe the Queensland Treasury?
Approximately?
Just
$13 million, I believe.
How much?
13.
13.
1-3, not 30.
Yeah, 1-3. It's 13. Yeah, I was just, yeah, you know what I'm doing. Brad knows what I'm doing.
And I think at some stage in the next financial year, or probably next calendar year, we'll have a look at that position and see whether the numbers stack up to do another early repayment, if it makes sense or not.
Yeah,
just a financial question.
Yeah, given we can borrow at a much half that rate.
So just on that, in terms of borrowing, as I recall previously, the explanation of why we didn't reduce that loan more than what we did. I think reduced it by 10 million, but theoretically we could have reduced all of it because we could have afforded to do that. But the argument was that we needed to hold some of that money in case of emergent major issues. Has that eventuated in any way?
The key outcome of the assessment that we did last year was that whilst we have $20 million of surplus cash now, or as at last year, above our minimum requirements, over a 10-year forecast from our long-term financial plan, that would reduce below the $10 million mark. So it meant that whilst we had $20 million now, we may not have that full availability in 10 years' time. And that was before allowing for any emergent new infrastructure projects that may not be captured in our 10-year plan. So the Conservative proposed approach was, let's take $10 million now, we'll pay off a portion of that loan, and we'll reassess how our 10-year plan looks every year as we get better with our 10-year planning for our capital works program. We get a better forecast of what our revenue and expenditure growth looks like. So we'll be, again, this year we'll be in a better position, as Brett says. It might change, hopefully in our benefit, given the operating surplus that we talked through with the annual report. And it might give us a position to reassess whether we do take some more of that remaining 10 mil surplus.
So, in a nutshell, stay conservative early and see where it goes and revisit on that.
Buffer zone, buffer.
Which is what we did.
Flood and fire, we don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anybody else care to speak to the motion? Okay. Ingrid, would you wish to close?
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Put the motion. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, and that's the last item on the agenda.
Thanks, Trent.
Thanks,